Hi, my name is Colin Goddard, 25 years old, survived the Virginia Tech shooting in 2007, was one of the more fortunate ones. After hearing about the idea that, to deal with problems like this in the future, students should bring guns to school as the way to solve this problem, I, thought that this was totally the wrong way to go about it. And that there are so many other steps that should be taken first before we ultimately need to just, let the good kids shoot it out with the bad kids. So when you hear about state initiatives here within Texas, and it's happening also in Kansas and Florida and other states as well, we try to come out here to offer a different opinion, to say, look, that this is not the first way forward. There are many other things that you got to consider before you allow something like this, and it will totally change the dynamic of how universities are run, how police respond to active shooters.
Lawmakers say gun-free zones attract criminals. If that's true, why is the violent crime rate on college campuses so much lower than off campus, where guns are allowed? If more guns meant less crime, the United States would be the safest place in the world.
I understand the desire from the other people on the other side. People feel insecure. People are worried that this is going to happen to them at their school. But there are so many other things, from providing a lock on a door in a classroom, for example, having an effective alert and messaging system to let students know what's going on campus. I didn't know that there was a shooting 2 hours before at Virginia Tech before I went to class that day. Mental health policies that will actually follow up with students and get them the help they needed, as well as we need to address the easy access that people have to guns. I mean, there are sales allowed here in Texas to people without background checks or paperwork or any ID shown. And I think improving that and stopping those kind of sales will make it less likely for this to happen in the future. I was shot 4 times, and I was fortunate to be one of the survivors from that morning. I never got involved in any of these issues, and I wouldn't be here today if I wouldn't have learned that students thought the way to deal with this situation is by putting more guns in the classroom. I was there that day. That was the craziest day of my life, with one person walking around with 2 guns. I can't even imagine what it would have been like with multiple students and multiple guns. We're trying to do what we can to, like I said, offer a different opinion at a time when hopefully it's critical, hopefully it may sway some people. If Texas passes this bill, it will totally change the dynamic of how police respond to an active shooter. And when the police need every second they can to respond effectively, they're going to have to distinguish between a well-intentioned citizen or the intentional shooter. When you frame it as, someone's about to come in and shoot you in your class, do you want a gun or not? People are going to say, yeah, of course. Everyone's going to say, yeah. But when you take the blinders off, you take a step back and you look at the thing, you realize that there are points of intervention that are always you could have done beforehand. If all those things are done and there's still a problem with violence and shooting on campus, then perhaps we could look at this idea. But at this point, it's really not the best step forward.
Hi, David. How are you?
James, it's getting cold. We're starting to snow again here.
Hey, listen, I just saw that Mr. Goddard's clip, and he's a pretty good-looking young man. He delivers his presentation well. I'm a little surprised. Here's a guy that's been shot 4 times, and he's anti-gun on campus. Now, what's your take on this?
Well, I think that, first of all, for that video to have been presented as straight news when it was obviously an infomercial with an agenda just shows you the state of the media that most Americans are subjected to, and they're not getting all sides of the story. One of the very important points that was left out was that Goddard managed to call 911 on his cell phone before Cho burst in and began shooting him and his classmates execution style. Now, I totally support Mr. Goddard's right to choose to be defenseless in a situation like that. What I reject is giving him any say-so whatsoever in my decision to exercise my unalienable right to keep and bear arms in defense of myself and those that I love. He has no say in the matter. And in terms of some of the solutions that he seemed to offer, put a lock on a door? Who doesn't have a lock on their door? In terms of a messaging system on campus, they had it. It failed miserably, although I understand some front office people managed to get warnings out to their kids who were on campus, while the rest of the general population was left in ignorance about what had already transpired.
Yeah, he made a remark. If all things were done, and when I come back from this break, I want to talk about what things he thought he should have done. We'll be right back. Hi, David. Listen, you know, one of the things that Mr. Goddard pointed out, and you alluded to it just a minute ago, was that he thought maybe locking the doors would have prevented this. Now, wait a minute. Come on. Any college campus you go to, I don't care if it's a high school campus, a university, a whatever it is, you go up there and knock on the door, hey, somebody's going to open the door. So how would that have changed anything?
Yeah. You know, James, everything that he suggested and says we have to try this first before we even think about guns, it's already been tried. In terms of background checks, again, what he failed to mention is that his assailant had passed background checks, and he'd even waited the required 30-day period in Virginia to get his second gun. So everything that we're talking about has already been done. Now, in terms of mental background checks, yeah, they've passed bills to do that. And what we really have to be careful of is that, first of all, most people with mental problems are not dangerous. But secondly, we are a nation of laws and we are a nation of rights, and we have to respect the rights of individuals and not allow fundamental rights to be stripped from us without being adjudicated and having due process. You know, James, if I turn out or you turn out to be dangerous or criminal, we commit acts, and there are processes in place to put us away. But in this country, we do not have a department of pre-crime. I can't arrest you no matter how much I may not like you and take you away and take your rights away from you until you do something to warrant that and you've been tried and convicted. That's just the way a free society works.
Yeah, well, I think there is such a thing as a citizen's arrest, but then you get into some legal issues because if what you're doing, you know, you can be sued for, you know, holding someone against their will and blah, blah, blah. It gets very complicated. Was one of Mr. Goddard's reasons, was he suggesting that we needed more security? Armed security, was that one of them? Because I didn't read that. I'm just guessing that's probably one.
You know, whether or not he did or not, that becomes what I call the only one's mentality, that only the police are responsible and trained and competent enough to be trusted with firearms. And of course, we know that that is not borne out, and that the average law-abiding citizen who is armed is responsible and exercises things responsibly. The whole argument, James, that if you cannot be trusted with a gun on campus leads back to, if you can't be trusted with it on campus, you cannot be trusted with a gun anywhere, because your behavior is not going to change.
Right.
And every argument that they can raise for why you should not be allowed to have guns on campus, if you follow their logic to its inescapable conclusion, what they're really saying is you may not have a gun anywhere.
Right. Well, what I'm kind of looking for out there, and I haven't seen so far, is someone who is actually challenging Mr. Goddard with things like, hey, you know what, those people wouldn't have been killed had there been someone there armed. And so far, I haven't seen any challenge to Mr. Goddard.
Oh, well, unfortunately, that again is because, as the media clip showed us, there is a true bias in the media that's anti-gun. I've been out there writing about this for years. As a matter of fact, to my surprise, I was invited by the New York Times a year after Virginia Tech to participate on a panel, and that was exactly the case that I made. And of course, unfortunately, it was me against like a director of the Institute of Law, Psychiatry, and Public Policy, director of the State Office of Homeland Security, the chaplain for the Blacksburg Police Department, the head of an anti-gun organization, the chief of mental health services for Harvard University Health Services, the general counsel for the American Council on Education, and they were all pitted against poor little me.
Yeah, that was a big panel. That was quite a challenge for you. Well, the long and the short of this is that Mr. Goddard is getting a lot of invitations to go around the country. He's, like I said, a good-looking kid. He presents himself well. I mean, it's a pretty tough case when you're the guy that's been shot 4 times and saying, hey, I don't want guns on campus. I mean, that's a pretty strong case. I don't know who's supporting him, whether he's doing it himself or whether the Brady campaign or someone like that.
He's an employee of the Brady campaign.
Oh, okay. Well, see, I was unaware of that. That's why I have you on, David, because I had not read that. And I think that this is probably going to develop further, and we're going to talk more about this in the future as we follow Mr. Goddard. I do appreciate you coming on, though, David. See you again next week.
James, see ya. Thank you.